Back in the day, my parents had some wealthy friends who lived in a big house out in the country. The place was enormous and occupied a huge lot surrounded by dense trees. I loved visiting. These people had a son my age named Stanley, and Stan and I were always outside, exploring the woods and the nearby creek. We were into nature, and we were always catching, or trying to catch, crayfish, frogs, toads, snakes, mice. Once we even caught a star-nosed mole. He had come up out of the ground and must have been dazed by sunlight, which enabled us to sneak up on him and pounce. We put our furry captive in a big wooden box in Stan's garage, then went to consult. This was long before the net. Herbert S. Zim's book, Mammals, in order to find out what to feed it. Only to learn a mole has to eat its entire weight in food every hour, or it will starve to death. The mole's starry snoz was turning blue by the time we rushed back to his wooden jail. We quickly returned him to the front lawn, where he disappeared down his hole without so much as a goodbye, not even a wave from those massive hands. In short, we were budding naturalists. But on this particular visit, I found Stan on the verge of tears, so as soon as we got outside, I asked him what was wrong. He was fighting it, but a solitary tear slipped out anyways. Cuddles is gone. Gone? He's missing. I should explain that Cuddles was a cat, and not a particularly cuddly one at that. He was a large gray feline with a white bib and a long gray mane, like a lion. Cuddles was basically a feral cat who lived by hunting in the woods, but who regularly visited the house, as Stan fed him. "I ain't seen him for a week," Stan choked. "I think something bad must have happened to him." I hated to see my buddy cry, so I suggested we do a sweep of the woods to see if we could find some trace of the missing puss. Unfortunately, we did find something: the cat's collar. Cuddles wore a thin collar around his neck, with a little copper disc bearing his name, along with Stan's phone number. It now lay at the edge of the path, its clasp broken and covered with what appeared to be blood, dried brown spots of some kind. Still, youth is optimistic, so we spent the next half hour combing through the trees and calling, "Cuddles! Cuddles! Cuddles!" Nothing. Once or twice, we both swore we heard a cat's meow, coming from far away. Stan swore it was Cuddles, but to me, the mewing had a strange, metallic quality, as if someone far away was playing a tape recording of Cuddles. Indeed, that was all we heard, for the woods had gone silent, not even the sound of the wind. We were on the verge of giving up when the puppy appeared. It was a cute little beagle pup that came gamboling up to us, jumping up on its hind legs and trying to lick our hands. Stan was instantly smitten. "Hey, boy, where did you come from, boy?" "He must belong to someone," I said, not wanting my friend, who was already upset, getting too attached to someone else's dog. "He must have got away from home. Bet someone is looking for him." Stan wasn't listening. I said aloud, "Go home, boy, go home." And the pup proceeded to jump up into my buddy's embrace. It followed us home, scampering and gamboling the whole way. I hope my folks let me keep him, Stan kept repeating, as if it was a prayer, all the way back to the house. Cuddles was forgotten. Now, Stan already had a dog, a big German shepherd named Nero, who lived in the big 3-car garage. Nero was tied up outside, waiting patiently for us to return. But the moment he saw the beagle, he went ballistic, howling and straining at his leash. Stan ran forward, yelling, "Nero! Be quiet, Nero!" But the big dog continued to growl, ears back, eyes almost popping out of his head. He even rose up on his hind legs in his effort to escape his bonds. The puppy had stopped dead the instant it saw Nero, and as I watched, it slowly began to back up, then turned around and started running back to the trees. Now Stan was chasing after it and calling, "Wait! Come back! Come back!" But the beagle ignored him and continued on until it disappeared back into the trees. Stan turned angrily towards Nero and shouted, "Bad dog! Bad, bad dog!" I expected Nero to grovel and whine, but instead, he kept staring towards the woods. Stan's mom came out to see what all the fuss was about, and he babbled out the story of Nero and the pup, as well as mentioning that we had found the cat's collar and figured Cuddles was dead. Of course, being an adult, she pooh-poohed the whole thing. Cuddles would come back soon, and the beagle decided to go back to its own home when it saw Nero, who was just barking and leaping around because he was so happy to see us. I could see Stan wasn't buying it, but he wisely kept his mouth shut and didn't argue. After dinner, when the darkness began to take control, we went out to play bats. Bats. I don't mean baseball, although this game did require a tennis ball. It also required a heavy-duty flashlight. This is how it worked. You walked to the woods and began tossing the tennis ball into the night sky. And within minutes, the air was full of curious bats attracted by the motion of the ball. We kept the beam of the flashlight on the ball and soon caught the outlines of the flying mammals, the light illuminating the membrane of their outstretched wings. We saw dozens of bats within minutes and were yelling and laughing when we heard another sound, the barking of a small dog. You think it's a pup?" Stan asked, and I could hear the hope in his voice. He shone the flashlight into the nearby bushes, and sure enough, the beagle was there, staring out at us. Stan knelt, patted his knee, and called, "Here, boy, come here." But the pup didn't budge. He tried again. "Come on, boy, it's okay. I won't let Nero hurt you." But the small dog stayed put. Stan was about to plunge into the trees to get him, but I put a restraining hand on his shoulder and said, "Wait a minute." I just suddenly had a bad feeling. Stan held the beam of the flashlight steady, and as we watched, the small dog began to change. Its body began to shimmer, as if we were looking at it through a veil or through haze. And then its shape began to change. It became larger, the fur becoming dark and coarse, the floppy ears becoming pointed, the tail longer and bushier, the eyes becoming two flaming red orbs, flaming red eyes, which seemed to penetrate and hypnotize. the little beagle had transformed into a German shepherd? A timber wolf? And then it stood up on its hind legs like a human being, and it had to be at least 7 feet tall, a 7-foot werewolf or dog creature, Dogman. It took a casual step towards us, like a man heading out on a stroll, and I yelled, "Run!" We took off as fast as our legs would carry us, but the werewolf, Dogman, it was faster, racing after us like an Olympic sprinter. The house was still over 100 yards away. I told you it was a big lot, and with its long stride, the Dogman would have us in its clutches before we even got close. We could feel the thing's hot, fetid breath on the back of our necks, and we could hear it panting. And then suddenly we heard another sound, angry barking, which was somehow familiar. "Nero!" The big dog came charging towards us, then past us, and amazingly enough, the Dogman turned and ran on its hind legs for the woods, with the German shepherd right on its heels. Both hunter and hunted disappeared into the trees. Stan's dad came running towards us from the house, calling, "What's going on, boys?" But before Stan could answer, I blurted, "Some weird thing was chasing us, and Nero went after it." "Nero?" But he was tied up. Was tied up. Nero had actually managed to break his leash, escape the garage, and save our asses. We sat out back in lawn chairs, but close to the house, and waited for Nero to return. It was a sorrowful vigil, and I felt sorry for my friend. First his cat disappears, then he falls in love with a pup that turns out to be a werewolf, and now his dog is in peril and might never return. Worse, Stan's dad thought the weird thing chasing us was a possum. A possum, and nothing for 2 grown boys to be scared of in the least. After an hour, Nero quietly returned. He slunk across the lawn as if trying to keep out of sight, and he kept stopping to turn his head and look back towards the woods. We took the hint and went inside. That night, I slept on an air mattress on the floor of Stan's bedroom, and Nero slept with us. And around 3 a.m., he woke us up with his growling. Something dark, a huge shape with red eyes, was outside Stan's window, but it went away when it heard Nero growling. By the way, Stan's bedroom window is about 25 feet off the ground. 25 feet. We went home the next day, and it turned out that was our last visit to the house in the country. And a year later, Stan's family moved to another part of the state. And Cuddles? Well, we thought he was a goner. But the cat came back the very next day. Apologies to Fred Penner, but once a librarian, always a librarian. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring cryptids such as the Night Floaters, Werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. Help me to get to 2,021 subscribers by 2021. Till midnight, Cheers!